I'm Shamal Faily from Bournemouth University, and in this talk I'm going to present a tool-supported approach for finding implicit vulnerabilities from user and system goal models by reframing personas as social goal models. Personas are fictional characters representing archetypal users. They're a popular user experience research artifact, as they make it possible to design for a single customer voice. They're found to be useful for getting security requirements too, and they're good for building empathy with stakeholders about the security needs of people represented by personas, particularly if these stakeholders have never met the people personas represent. In practice though, personas typically only get used for validating stakeholder value, even though they have the potential to help elicit and validate security requirements more generally. To obtain more value from personas in security requirements engineering, it's worth remembering that personas are, fundamentally, user models. And requirements engineering has got a track record in using goal models as user models, and some insight into eliciting, specifying, validating and maintaining them. So if we can turn personas into goal models, we might better embed their use into goal-oriented security requirements engineering. But there are two questions we need to answer first. The first question is, how can persona creation be leveraged to construct goal models? There are many ways of creating a persona. How can we take advantage of a process that can help us construct goal models too? The second question, which is a corollary of the first, is how can we reuse existing work and thinking so our persona as a goal model can help us elicit or validate implicit vulnerabilities too. And we'll say a bit more about what these are shortly. Our approach brings together two pieces of work from requirements engineering and human-computer interaction. On the left, from the RE community, we have social goal modeling languages that visualize contributions that user goals can make to each other and dependencies that actors might have on these goals. These languages are expressive and let you spot change of dependencies and contribution and ask questions about how warranted trust being placed on different users might be. Now, while not heavily used in practice, there has been some emphasis on how extending these notations for security might be possible, such as adding extensions for specifying vulnerabilities. But there hasn't been so much thinking on how the notation can help us find them in the first place. The notations are also visually complex, and models can become difficult to maintain as they grow. Now, on the right, we have work that was presented at CAIRIS a few years ago, called persona cases, and this is a means for assuring personas. Now, this approach shows how qualitative models can be used to make construction of personas a bit more systematic. And in this case, our qualitative model could be a model of some human perception or behaviour, and each relationship in this model is a characteristic of a persona, and the qualitative model elements can be mapped onto elements of an argumentation model. The persona case approach gives us the basis of an approach that addresses our first question. But we need to show how we can tool support an approach with no more burden than absolutely necessary. To demonstrate this, our approach builds on the ACME framework. Now, ACME is a process framework that incorporates a methodology-agnostic metamod that shows how design concepts from security, usability and requirements engineering are interrelated. And such concepts are associated with the persona technique, risk and threat modelling in general, and chaos for system goal modelling. And we've also shown how there's conceptual alignment with the goals requirements language too. Now, the CAIRIS platform was created as an exemplar for tool support for IRIS. So if you understand personas and goal modelling, you should be able to figure out how to use CAIRIS to support these techniques. Now, because it builds on the ACME meta model, CAIRIS can automatically generate lots of different visual models, and this makes it possible to put models in context with other models, and this supports validation checks across models without making any changes to visual model semantics. For example, in work we recently presented at GramSec, we showed how we can do pre-process and post-process timeflow analysis checking on design-level DFDs without making any changes to DFD semantics because of how DFD elements align with other model elements. Now, our intention is to do the same thing with personas and goal models, i.e. make no fundamental changes to either, but leverage their alignment instead. If we zoom into the relevant parts of the ACME meta model, we can see changes we need to make for our approach are quite modest. The classes at the top of this figure in grey form the conceptual model for personas and their grounding. So the user goal concepts in blue are just reframing concepts that are already present. Although not shown in this figure, contributions are also a reframing of the relationship between document references and persona characteristics too, although contributions might arise between document references and persona characteristics to persona characteristics too, based on their associated user goals. To explain our approach, we're going to walk you through an illustrative example. It's a different example to that in the paper, but both are situated around a hypothetical water company which is based on a real water company in the UK. Now, here we've got Ben. Ben's a persona created of a professional penetration tester, and he was derived from a grounded theory model of ethical tensions faced by experienced penetration testers. Now, we used our persona case approach to derive Ben from the grounded theory model, and we subsequently validated the tensions by using a pre-mortem scenario, where we envisaged scenarios where a vulnerability scan led to plant operators being locked out of applications at a critical moment. We're going to use our approach to see if we can identify or corroborate evidence of unprofessional behaviour. We've got the persona, a scanned vulnerability task specifying how Ben and a managing consultant persona complete this as part of an engagement, and a system goal model in chaos representing the CREST code of conduct. Now, Ben was based on real data from professional penetration testers, and our task and the supporting evidence has been validated with penetration testers too. Our approach for modelling user goals turns the argumentation model on the left into part of a user goal model on the right, where the working with IT team's persona link becomes the security problems explained soft goal. Now, argumentation links are reframed as contribution links, so the blame grounds of the persona characteristic is intentionally expressed as the blamed for outages belief, which contributes to security problems explained. And the methodology explained grounds becomes a hard goal with the same name, as this can be measurably satisfied, i.e. getting some form of confirmation from the client. Security problems explained is also a means for some other user goals, i.e. red-blue team game avoided soft goal, which was the red-blue team game warrant in the persona characteristic. The paper describes the algorithm for calculating goal contribution scores, but we can see from the slide that it's based on the product of the contributing goal score and the contribution link score. And you can see how we can set initial satisfaction levels for goals and beliefs. So Ben is somewhat satisfied that he's being blamed for outages, and it doesn't adequately explain the approach he takes in terms of methodology. We could enter information about user goals and contribution links directly into CAIRIS, but it's possible that somebody doing this would want to elicit goals and contribution links at the same time using more familiar tools. So we've created the ability in CAIRIS to export pre-populated Excel spreadsheets with persona characteristics and implicit contribution links, so user goals and contribution links can be quickly set. Now, this part of the user goal model that we see in the slide indicated the impact of methodology not being explained, but we want to better understand the professional causes that led to this not happening. Now, information about these professional causes can be found in the broader CAIRIS model, and we can connect our user goal model up to the rest of the CAIRIS model in two ways. First, tasks in CAIRIS can contribute positively or negatively to a user goal, as we can see on the left. We've already modelled a scanned vulnerability task describing a narrative in terms of the specified behaviour, along with consequences to indicate what went wrong, i.e. users getting locked out of their accounts. Now, as I said earlier, we've done a pre-mortem analysis with other professional penetration testers to find the root causes, and one of these was that the engagement wasn't properly explained to the client, so the task proceeded without confirmation. Now, we've captured this consequence in the task description, but what we've now done is added a contribution link to show the implications to user goals. Second, we can add traceability links between user goals and system goals in CAIRIS, which are modelled using the chaos goal modelling language. Now, we've taken the CREST code of conduct and we've modelled it as a system goal model, and on the right we can see this model filtered by the personal example principle from the code of conduct, where we have a professional competence goal, which says the CREST members should be a model for professional competence, has been obstructed, and this is because the scope of an engagement has been exceeded, as we've seen earlier. Explaining work is something a competent consultant would do. So we've added a traceability link to the methodology explained hard goal, so the obstruction of this goal is leading to the denial of that user goal. Now, traceability links are bidirectional. Now, here we see that Ben should adhere to the code of conduct when carrying out hard goals like explaining the methodology. But alternatively, we could have reviewed the code of conduct and mapped system goals to user goals to see what the broad implications of the code of conduct to the persona might be. Our approach is ultimately about identifying implicit vulnerabilities, and these have been defined by the RE community as vulnerabilities that may be present when dependees fall short of their responsibility to dependers to deliver dependums. ACME CAIRIS already supports dependency modelling of system goals, and we can see that, based on our model, consultants are relying on managing consultants who act as role models to consultants. We can identify implicit vulnerabilities in two ways. First, if a dependent goal has been obstructed. We've seen this is the case already. Second, if the dependent goal is traceability linked to a denied user goal. Now, we've seen this too, both as a result of the above, but also because the user goal itself is subsequently denied because of a task contribution. Now, in CAIRIS, we've implemented validation checks for implicit vulnerabilities, and as you can see on the left-hand figure, CAIRIS flags implicit vulnerabilities for both reasons. Implicit vulnerabilities are not system vulnerabilities, but they could provide insight when these are put in context. For example, CAIRIS also supports responsibility model, i.e. indicating what roles take responsibility for goals, obstacles or tasks. Now this can be explicitly set or, in this case, will be added automatically if personas participate in tasks because personas fulfill one or more roles, which is what we see in this model. Now until now, we haven't considered the impact of the managing consultant, who was acting as a mentor for Ben, but was also involved in the task, and this could be an area worthy of further investigation. In the paper, we describe applying our approach to a case study, also associated with ACME Water, where we analyse a security policy for implicit vulnerabilities. We have a security policy modelled in CAIRIS, and as we can see on the right, we've turned a plant operator persona, called Rick, into a user goal model. During the study, we found evidence that an ICT awareness policy goal was obstructed due to inadequate equipment management. Now that policy goal seemed to be linked to an InfoSec comms perceived user goal, which we found to be weakly denied due to physical security fears, expressed by the thieves steal anything belief highlighted. Now the problem here is that there was a missing security manager dependency on outsourced partners for achieving the ICT awareness system goal. Now once the policy goal and the soft goal were linked, this denial was actually strengthened, and we saw the impact that this limited security awareness was having elsewhere, and we identified an additional dependency which you can read about in the paper. We also used the user goal model to justify the specification of a pre-existing exposed cabinet vulnerability. We noted that security managers depend on plant operators for an industrialized secure cabinet policy goal, and plant operators check these cabinets when leaving the control room to check on certain instrument alarms. Now we indicated this with contribution links to some cogent hard goals, particularly the SCADA alarm responded user goal. However, personal safety fears means cabinet checks could potentially be skipped. Now this shows up as a weakly satisfied user goal for responding to alarms, so if the cabinet is not always checked, this could be left exposed or damaged via some other means. So this seems to be a valid system vulnerability. Before we finish, I want to discuss a few limitations and directions for future work. So user goal models are social goal models, but they're ultimately less expressive than I-star goal models created by hand. An example of this restricted expressiveness is the lack of support for strategic dependencies between user goals. Now this looks easy to implement, but it does require changes to how qualitative data grounding personas is listed and analysed, so that the collaborative elements that lead to strategic dependencies can be properly encapsulated. Now this is an interesting direction for future work, particularly where such dependencies have security implications. Another limitation of our work is that our study only considers a single persona. Now in theory, there's no reason and no obvious performance constraint that would stop us working with multiple interacting personas, but this is something that we need to formally evaluate. One question that remains is our approach more effective at finding security vulnerabilities than standard social goal modelling techniques? Now we're looking at taking some corpus of user research data and seeing whether comparing our approach with the less automated human-powered goal modelling techniques leads to a better model in terms of finding more implicit vulnerabilities. So we're currently looking at some experimental methods for doing this evaluation, and we're interested in hearing from anyone who would like to collaborate with us on this work. Thanks for taking the time to listen to our talk, and I hope you find our approach useful. CAIRIS is a free open source platform, and the paper contains a link to the case study CAIRIS model we built, so you're more than welcome to try our approach out yourself on the study data. Please get in touch with me if you have any questions or are interested in collaborating with us to further develop this work.